All right, we are here once again at the home of HP Australia in the Rhodes office here at Sydney. Rob, good to have you by my side as
Great
always.
to be back.
And we've got another person live in the studio today. Welcome along, Dino. Rob, help me with the last name, Dino.
Dino Strkljevic.
Dino, how you doing, brother?
Hey. Thanks for having me in the studio. I love it. I love the setup. It's really cool.
Like
I'm gonna
the setup.
steal
You
these
got to steal
LED lights
the
when
Intel.
I-
Obviously, a
when I
big
leave.
collaboration with HP and Intel, bringing us the Reinvent the Classroom podcast. But Intel is close to your heart.
Absolutely, of course. I mean, I've worked there, but also I've been a technologist for the best part of the last 2-3 decades, in fact. So.
How good do you do the chimes? Can you do the chimes in tone with the chimes?
Dun, 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 dun.
Oh, wow, I was really off key when I did it. I went ding, ding, ding,
Yeah,
ding.
that actually sounded right.
Yeah.
I
I'm way
thought you were
off,
on the
way off.
X-Files theme last
Yeah,
time.
X-Files. That was good old Kelly Hollis with the X-Files. Bit of a flashback to a previous episode. But how's your HyperX microphone ready to go there?
Beautiful.
Nice schlick or schmick setup. Let's dive right in.
Sure, let's do it.
All right, Dino, tell me, fascinated to have you here. Obviously, not an educator yourself, but surrounded by educators. Your mum was a teacher, right?
Yes, she was a long time ago in former Yugoslavia, where I grew up. Now it's Bosnia. But yeah, my mum had she was in finance. She was a finance director for a big company, and then when kids came along, she's like, you know what, I need to kind of slow down, take less responsibility. You know, I'm passionate about teaching. So she ended up teaching in a high school, economics and a bunch of other things. And then something new came along. I don't exactly remember the name of that subject, but it was IT related. So like it was COBOL and a bunch of other programming languages.
COBOL, that's going back.
Yes. So me as a little guy, I was reading through the exam papers and laughing at the stupid answers
The students
the students were replying with. I knew more than they did already, and I was a little something.
So right from the early days of your childhood, the interconnection between technology and education like fused really early on.
Oh, absolutely. And my mum was a tough cookie. She would have a student-teacher meeting with my teacher and say, Dino is not reading those books as well as you should. You should, probe him a bit harder. Push him a bit more. So she would push me a lot as well, and also make sure that her teachers knew if I was dropping a ball somewhere. So very tough cookie.
Look, we're going to talk a little bit about technology. Obviously, you're like you said, your employer is Intel. We're going to dive into some of the things that are happening there. And I think our listener base is going to be very fascinated to hear your perspective as I guess an expert, a genuine expert in your field. But before we dive in there, I'm curious. Teachers love learning things and love understanding new perspectives. I know we have spoken about your son and schooling here in Australia. I'm curious to see from your perspective the comparisons or the differences between your youth growing up, your education in former Yugoslavia to the way your children have been taught in Australia. Like, what's been the same? What's been different?
Wow, now this is taking me back many years, and I'm even trying to remember how it all, came about. But I went through a few schooling systems because I was also a refugee in Croatia, and then we also obviously then moved to Australia. So I had a few starts in few different countries. So my experience in former Yugoslavia, in Bosnia, was in primary school.
Yep.
It was a little bit more structured in terms of there was a lot more subjects than that were taught here. So general education was probably better, but also that probably incentivized more cramming, and I'm not sure that that's necessarily the best way
the
to
rote learning type.
yeah,
of
you had to really
memorization.
memorize a lot. Another huge difference was the fact that the teachers were doing verbal exams, and they were unannounced verbal exams, and they were scary as anything. So you had to be prepared to take an exam anytime, all the time.
Wow.
And if the teacher was a bit angry on one day, they would flip this huge they had this huge book of where they were writing all the marks. They will flip the book and, you know, split open and then go, okay, we are testing people with surname K, bang, stand up, here's a question for you. It was a bit,
On the spot,
that used
intimidating.
you would get, like normally that type of examination was prevalent in universities where you had to know your body of work, but you had time to prepare and do that sort of thing. But yeah, that was super scary. So I was always mortified that my name would come up, and because my name was starting with S, if they start from the back of the book, I'm usually fairly close.
Pretty
to it.
early.
But yeah, I was first child. I was a pretty good student, so I tended to do well. I knew how to read teachers and what answers to give. So actually, I'll give you a funny story. When I went to Croatia, we had this insane history teacher. Like, he was crazy. And I'll tell you why he was crazy. Like, we would walk into a class, he would bring this gramophone, is that what it's called?
Like a record player type.
But with the
big
yes,
flower-looking
yes,
thing.
that.
Yeah, right.
Put a Marseillaise on, French anthem, start like stomping the ground and like singing Marseillaise, and then start talking about something in French Revolution or whatever. And then he would pick people up and go, okay, I want you to give me your opinion on this or that. So, and I knew how to figure this guy out. And he would never give anyone more than 3 out of 5. 5 was perfect mark.
Right.
And he would say, God knows for 5, I know 4, and you guys know 3, 2, or 1. 1 is a fail, 2 and 3. That's all. I figured him out. I used to play tricks with him. I would bring a daily newspaper or something, and when he was walking to class, I would read like a politics section or something like that. And he was just intrigued that this little high school kid, first year of high school, which is year 9 in Croatia, you're like, oh, this kid's a bit weird. Why is he reading, political stuff? So he would ask me for my opinion on some conflict that happened in Macedonia, Greece, or whatever, and I would rattle on some nonsense answer, but give a little bit of background that I knew, and he was so impressed. He concluded my final year's mark for that year with 5.
Hey.
Oh,
Holy
God level.
smokes! Yes, God level.
God level.
Never seen before or after. That was insane. So.
There you go.
Wow.
There you go.
It didn't stop from there because I think you reached similar levels in. Well, it's a community that I was on the peripheral of, and you are a world record holder, I believe.
Oh, many world records, in fact.
Oh,
So-
many. Oh, well, no, don't insult the man by saying he's only got one
So
world
sorry.
record.
One
So
world
So
record.
rude.
Tell us
look,
about that.
Yeah, look, I that started really in Australia. So I when I came here, I got to finally have a little bit more money and buy better hardware, better gear. And then the forums started in early 2000. So Overclockers Australia, Whirlpool, there's a bunch of different
I don't think everybody listening is going to know what an overclocker is.
Yes,
when you say
so-
Whirlpool, most people listening are probably going to think of a washing machine.
Yes. So it's a forum. So before social media networks, now your Facebooks and Snapchats, kids used to hang out digitally on forums, and we used to go to a forum and write
Like bulletin boards and
a
stuff. we
bulletin
called
board.
them at the time
Exactly.
too.
We used to write, posts on there and basically exchange ideas. That's how it started. And I would, pick up hardware as a result because we were pushing each other, overclocking, breaking world records. What is overclocking? Basically, overclocking is taking a CPU or a PC and pushing frequencies beyond the manufacturer's specifications. Why would we do that? Why do people race cars? Why do people drag race cars, right? For same reasons, right? So we started doing that.
Pick up the ladies.
And then, that's it. But then what ended up happening was we realized that people were doing the same thing in Japan, in United States, and everywhere else, because there was a famous forum called Extreme Systems in America. So we would all go there, and someone would announce a world record, and we're like, hang on a second, mate. We got a better score than you. So we would go and post a better score by doing all those things. And I actually formed the first big overclocking team in Australia called Team AU. And that's when basically it was a group of the best of the best. And then all the great things started. In 2007, we went to ABC television. We in fact, one of the people that you mentioned, came along with us into the studio. And
Yeah,
we-
a good friend of mine, a mutual friend at the time.
Yes.
Yeah. Craig. G'day, Craig.
Yeah, so Craig Sims used to be, I think, the chief writer or editor of Atomic Magazine, a huge magazine in Australia for gamers and enthusiasts. And we attempted to break a world record using liquid nitrogen in studio in ABC. It was absolutely amazing. What we didn't know when we were trying to do that was every take, every shot that we took, the director would say, "Oh, can you say exactly the same thing, do exactly the same thing to this camera now?" And we're like, "Oh man, you can't just, this is impossible to just identically replicate." No one told us that, so we tried to do that in the studio. It was hilarious, but it was a lot of fun.
Now, the liquid nitrogen that you're using, because obviously what you're trying to do with the overclocking is generating such heat. Is it the same concept? Are you trying to cool just like the fan would do in a PC? You're trying to cool down the unit. Is it the same purpose with the liquid nitrogen?
Yeah. So the way you overclock is you have to feed more voltage in a car. You give the car more horsepower, and as a result, there's more heat generated. So even in cars, you have to improve the fans and the
cooling system.
even in the cooling systems. And when you go to like Dinos, where they do the big horsepower runs,
Dinos.
yes,
Dino's
Dinos.
22.
Dino's
That's how that's yeah. Anyway, there's history there. So they would sometimes put dry ice and things inside the cooling system to make the car. So same thing with PCs. They get hotter essentially. So you're giving more voltage, it gets more hotter. So the reason it gets hotter is because the electrons move a lot faster in silicon. And for you to be able to basically keep going or increasing, you have to maintain or manage the temperature. So how do you do that? You know, initially we were using refrigeration cooling. So it was minus 25, and then dry ice, minus 70 so. And then liquid nitrogen, minus 196. In fact, I even used liquid helium, minus 240, minus 250.
That doesn't sound safe at all.
No, it is quite safe. We had so many events where we had to explain to OHS people what it's all about, and it's all about. Of course, there are dangers there. So because it sucks the oxygen out of the atmosphere, so you obviously have to have a well ventilated area. There you can have freeze burns if you're not handling it properly. So there are some things that people do, but I'll give you one stat. There's a website called hwbot.org where all the world records are now officially announced and recognized. There's over 50,000 people doing this worldwide. So this is not a one random
Tiny
guy in a
little niche.
basement. This is a big deal now.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow. And are you the current world champion?
So the way it works, I don't compete for rankings anymore,
Right.
and I haven't really officially competed since even my last job because I was involved in the industry. So, but my team AU, we've held pretty much every world record, just about every world record there is to hold during that time when we first formed, since 2007 until now.
Wow.
So currently there are a whole bunch of world records that we currently hold. Not all of them, of course, but we
That's a really
yeah.
cool, even just from an Australiana
Yes.
sort of story, to know that Australian or Team AU is really challenging the entire world and waving that Aussie flag.
Absolutely, and every year in December there's a country cup, like a World Cup of Overclocking. We've won it 6 times out of the last 8 years. By the way, so Australian
It's like the
community
America's
is
Cup, we're dominating.
exactly. We've taken the sales away from them.
Wow.
So obviously, the manufacturers would be starting to take interest as you're growing up. You're a speed demon, and you became an expert at this. Mm-hmm. So what happened then?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. In early 2000s, I was very active on these forums, so these sort of social media platforms. So I guess you could call me the early tech influencer, right? It's a
The Kim Kardashian.
The Kim Kardashian of
overclocking.
Yeah, so I started getting. I remember this very like it was yesterday. I got a message on Extreme Systems from a guy who said he worked for NVIDIA, and NVIDIA, for those of you that don't know, is a graphics card manufacturer. They're huge.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, yeah, I work for NVIDIA in Santa Clara, and we would like to invite you to come to Santa Clara. And we're like, is this for real? I goes, yeah, we'll and they booked tickets, limo, the whole lot. And I used to basically be the only overclocker, international overclocker, to go into NVIDIA's Editors Days, which happened once a year, where the CEO would give a roadmap or an update on all the latest and coolest products. So I was involved in their product development team. So I was the guy behind the scenes saying, you're doing this badly, you're doing this well, let's keep going.
Wow.
And I was the community guy. So I knew what people wanted. And, you know, since then, I've actually, this passion, I've made it into a career. I ended up at Intel. And I still do that, even though my day job is more on the product strategy or sales strategy and things like that. I'm still the voice within Intel internally and globally on various things that are happening on the ground. So even education is an example. We meet with a lot of departments of education. And I don't just work in ANZ, I work in Southeast Asia as well. And we collect a lot of really good feedback, and we learn a lot in terms of what's happening on the ground, the challenges that people have on the ground. And I'm the guy that says to the development team, hey, we need to change this, do that. Let's, tweak it here, tweak it there. We need these things, those things.
Still amplifying that community voice.
Absolutely. Still do that.
But does speed still matter?
Absolutely. Always.
Why? Why does it matter to normal people?
In the latest, this is actually quite interesting. We can talk about this a bit later if you want. But Intel's latest products, 12th gen and 13th gen, are based on this really cool new architecture that's hybrid. It's a performance hybrid architecture that has performance cores and efficient cores. And the reason we did that is we kept these classic performance cores that we used to always produce. And the reason you need them is they are the high frequency, super fast, super responsive ones. That you notice your responsiveness in your system immediately when these guys are running. But there's also this push to have a lot of these cores so you can do content creation, a lot of very complex tasks with your PCs. So we've basically added these efficient cores or E-cores to basically complement the performance cores. So performance cores give us, and you don't need a lot of them. So up to 8 is enough. And in fact, some laptops only run 2. But they give you this burst of performance, and you notice every time you buy a new system every 3 or 4 years, they just fly. And that's the P-cores. But now we've also got these E-cores which help create this, basically they combine it to do a few different things. They will do background tasks. So your Windows, for example, has Windows updates, Office updates, antivirus is running in the background. There's a whole bunch of school-related software that runs in the background. Efficient cores look after that sort of stuff. And the performance cores are there for the tasks that are right at hand. Your PowerPoint, your Word, your photo editing, whatever it is that you're doing. And they are the kings, and the better the frequency, the better they perform. So frequency matters.
So I guess if you were asking your students to open a book and they didn't have computers, they're opening a book, and you could get them to open it in 10 seconds instead of 2 minutes. I mean, over the course of a year, that's going to matter. I guess this is a similar thing for a teacher, right?
Absolutely. And this is something that is potentially neglected when we are not the best at sometimes talking about the benefits, end user benefits of what you get when you buy a new device, right? But sometimes these little things can make a lot of difference long term. So as you rightly pointed out, when you start adding up I'll give you a good example. So we've created this platform called Evo. And I think Brett's using an Evo laptop.
Yeah, we've got a Dragonfly with the Evo.
So these laptops, you flick a lid open and it instantly works under 1 second. And this is part of the specification. And you are, like my laptop, I don't know if that one's got facial recognition, I'm sure it does. My laptop, same thing, Evo. I open it, I'm in Windows, everything is already running, and I'm using it. If you reverse back 3 or 4 years, you open it, nothing happens, you press a lid, it's being weird, then you go through the logos and startups and stuff, then you have to punch in your password, then you're trying to open up software, then you're waiting for that circle to, then 10 minutes, 15 minutes later, you're finally in and you can try and go and do something. Try and adding that up during the day, during the week, during the month, during the year, during the life of that product. It is ridiculous how much time people used to waste. And this is something that Intel creates platforms
If you're
and
doing
solutions
a
to
science
fix it.
lesson or something, you want the students to go and measure something. They come back, their computer's gone to sleep. Yeah, you could lose whole minutes there just in one lesson.
I was actually just really recently over in New Zealand, and I was talking to a principal of a pretty elite school, and they're going through potentially a little bit of a refresh of the computers that they're using. And I was talking pedagogical practice and about the concept of Reinvent the Classroom and training teachers. And I guess we were talking teacher to teacher and able to have a conversation. He said, look, without a sales pitch, like what sort of technology should we be using? And I am no way. I've been a friend of yours for a long time. I know your depth of knowledge within hardware and the detail you have behind the scenes of what goes into a computer, and obviously sitting opposite
Nothing
like a
like this.
genuine genuine world champion sort of expert in the field. And I gave the really novice answer and said, look, I don't know, like the specs and feeds and the things that you want to look for change year to year. 9th gen, 10th gen, 11th and 13th gen. So every year, what is current and best and everything will change and evolve. But the simple, like, layperson solution is you look for the machine that has been badged Evo. If you just look for the Evo badge, it has met this immense criteria that Intel have set that says exactly what you said. Like, it's got incredible battery life. It's got incredible power to be able to do multiple tasks simultaneously without losing efficiency. It's got, like you say, you can open up, bang, you're in within that certain time frame. You don't need to know the detail that you guys know in the back end. You actually have this simple badge to go, this is top shelf quality, like pre-approved. It's like that stamp to say, yes, this is gold standard.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I'll give you a little bit of background in terms of what Intel brings to the table sometimes in the industry, which people don't realize. Because most people, when you say Intel, they'll be like, oh, Intel processor, Core i7 or something, right?
Yeah. Also, Moore's Law, like just
Moore's Law.
get
yes.
faster, get faster, get faster,
Yeah.
which I know you're about,
Yeah.
or you certainly were.
Sure. One thing that what people don't realize is Intel's been doing this for the best part of last 50 plus years and driving the industry in a certain direction in addressing standards and creating solutions for whether it's teachers, whether it's corporate environment, whether it's overclockers, gamers, you name it. Creating platforms for them that are optimized for them and their type of use. And how does this happen? And why is this important? Well, think about it. There's a heck of a lot of research, by the way, that goes into this. So we've got teams that do short-term research, 1 or 2 years, 5 years, and some even 20, 25 years. So we work with associate professors from esteemed universities and stuff. But that research basically bubbles down into we really can. There are a lot of problems that people are facing. I've used an example of Evo as one, but we can even rewind the clock back. And if you remember Centrino, Centrino and Wi-Fi, laptops were made and they didn't have Wi-Fi. They did not have wireless connectivity. It was pretty crazy. And Intel guys were like, well, they're not really laptops, are they? We need to figure out a way for the entire industry to adopt Wi-Fi. So Intel created a platform, Centrino Wi-Fi, and went to all the big guys, HPs and everyone else, and said, hey guys, we are baking a cake. We've got the core ingredients, the recipe. Here it goes. Adopt it. Let's adjust. Let's bring this solution to the market to fix a systematic problem in terms of what these devices should be. So ever since then, Wi-Fi has obviously helped differentiate laptops and create a true portable device. Fast forward a few years, the laptops were heavy, battery was not very good. The materials they were made out of were a bit, not great. The end user experience was not magical. So Intel went, okay, we've been studying this trend. We've got a solution. It's called Ultrabook, right?
Yeah.
So we did the same thing. we went to the market. We said, and we don't just provide a solution for the processor. We did deals in ecosystems. So we brought in the low power screen manufacturers into the deal, for example. So the screens used to consume like 10 watts of power. We brought half a watt of power screens into the mix.
So bringing a lot of different elements under
Correct.
the same tent.
The engineering teams worked with the engineering teams with HP, for example, and they did co-engineered cooling solutions, thermal acoustic solutions, all sorts of advancements essentially to create a platform that's not going to be causing problems for you, but actually working for you. You know, something you'd really want to have, and that'll address a few things. One was portability, because we went from 4 or 5 kilo laptops to 1 kilo, 1.5, 2 kilo laptops that had a decent battery life.
I think part of the incredible part of that story, and each iteration that you do it, is that you're bringing together competitors who don't naturally want to work together to agree on protocols and how things and standards and how things could and should work in a way that actually everybody's sort of working together to make things actually better, more sustainable. Each iteration is just that much better for us.
That's the beauty of Intel, because Intel brings standards. Intel brings vision and wants to bring the ecosystem together to address challenges with technology going forward. So we see the past, we see the future, and we know how to basically bake that cake.
So you've seen this
with
done
partnership of all of these people.
Over many iterations. You've seen this done because you've been part of it since Ataris and Commodore 64s and that kind of thing. So watching that happen, I'm thinking of it from the point of view of a teacher who's very interested in design and systems and processes and systems thinking and design thinking. How is it that a company like Intel is able to bring different people who might not usually agree together to systematize this so that you can improve products and services for the end people? Like, why does it work, and how can we as teachers sort of make that part of what we're teaching our students when it comes to them thinking about designing solutions and services and products?
Wow, that's a super deep question, and I'm thinking maybe I should call Pat and get Pat, our CEO, to maybe give you his thoughts on this. I think it's about finding something everyone's got in common, and recognizing that there is a problem that we need to address, and that we can't do it on our own. That we need to band together to address a certain issue or provide a certain standard or way forward or vision forward, right? Everyone needs to agree that there needs to be sort of a common solution that requires a few parties to come together and go and do that. Otherwise,
we're living in something a little bit that right now. Like there's been such a huge explosion recently about AI and an awareness of AI, and I'm sure you've been well ahead of the pack and been developing things quietly and embedding things, but since ChatGPT sort of became a big thing in December, it has been a significant game changer with education, and departments of education and entire systems are trying to grapple and change, and how do we effectively teach in a world where the AI is so ubiquitous across all of our platforms and access that students are having, and is going to grow exponentially moving forward. Like, where does Intel come into that AI development, or where do they fit into that whole narrative?
I give you a perspective from the client business side, because I'm mostly involved in devices that people use every day.
Yeah.
Rather than servers, rather than graphics accelerators. And most of our development is obviously on the server side, on the graphics accelerator side, on the software team side. We've got an enormous software team in Intel, over 19,000 software engineers. We write as much code as some of the biggest companies. I'm not going to name names, but you can imagine
software
how
companies.
You can imagine how big this team is. So AI obviously is clearly the way of the future. on the clients, from client's perspective, I'll give you some practical example of how interesting AI is and what it brings to the table. So in 2019 or so, Intel started to, in client devices, so we're talking about laptops, for example, with 10th generation, we started bringing these, putting these accelerators, if you will, with the processor itself. So there's a processor, but there are all these assistants that are also helping the processor do something way more efficiently. Why are they interesting? So you had a bunch of podcasts on Teams or Zoom. Which platform did you use? Teams?
Mixture of both over the
Yeah,
years.
so most people use Teams or Zoom, right? On Teams and Zoom, there is and it's enabled by default, a setting to remove background noise. That's AI.
Mm-hmm.
And that's powering, we have an accelerator since 2019 in most of our systems that removes background noise in Teams and Zoom using 1/10 of the power that a CPU would use. Our competitors don't have that.
Yeah, wow.
So basically, you can imagine having an Intel product and a competitor's product, and you're sitting on 3 hours of Zoom meetings, and you're removing this sound by default, and one is using the processor, which uses 10 times more power to remove background noise versus the Intel. I mean, this is an incredible thing, and there are so many more of these examples.
I will admit, like we've got the poly just on the poly video bar just over there, and I learned just a little while ago. And it's funny that you say audio and audio with AI is not something that a teacher or anyone, a layman, would naturally put together. But I've seen that within this sort of product, you can make a digital acoustic barrier. You can draw a line in your video feed, and the AI will filter out the audio that falls on the other side of that acoustic barrier and filter that out. But allow audio that's on the other side. That's a significant game changer in an education setting, because suddenly you could be in a noisy classroom, have an acoustic barrier between the conversation that you're trying to have and block out all the noisy conversations that are happening all around the classroom, and let the students that are zooming in and having a hybrid learning experience still be able to have effective communication. Even from an audio sense, the AI infiltrating our everyday accessibility to learning.
Absolutely. And the reason why I use that example was because the point I want to make is that AI is there to assist us and to remove some everyday trivial tasks that we really should have an assistant do. And that assistant is obviously a piece of technology that's either built into a server, cloud, or client device, etc. And that's where it's really heading. It's really trying to allow us as individuals to be the best version of ourselves and not let us bog down with some trivial tasks that we would go and have to do every day. Now, of course, a lot of people, when you say AI, people are scared of change, and they're like, that's going to take our jobs and stuff like that. And we went to EduTech last year, and our new general manager at the time, Andy Mack, he presented in a keynote, he presented some interesting ideas, and he showed jobs of today and jobs of the future. And there will be a lot more jobs in the future, but they're different. The education system slowly needs to start to build the right paths to make sure that we are driving these new kids into the right directions, and STEM, software coding, stuff like that.
So what can you tell us about some of that future, what's coming, and also what part Intel's maybe having in that?
Yeah, so I mean, I've got a couple of colleagues talking to you guys. I believe I think Snow White and maybe Audrey. Yeah. They'll be talking to you about skills for innovation and a number of programs that Intel has developed. So I won't steal their thunder. I'll let them,
let them deep dive into what skills for innovation is.
Yes.
For our listeners, make sure you keep an eye out for the skills for innovation episode with Audrey Lim.
Yes. So Audrey is fantastic, and she is our education lead for APJ. So she'll tell you a lot about some of these things that are happening. But there are a lot of exciting things happening. But I guess I kind of touched on it as I was sort of talking about it. You're going to see a lot of like software development.
Won't the AI write all the software for us?
Yeah. Well, not really. I mean, you AI. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but these systems are going to automate some of these processes. But some of the big ideas, direction, standards, you're going to need smart, people to really go and drive that technology in the right way, I think, and get the most out of it, right? So I think that's where it's kind of heading. That's my vision.
I think it's curious that you touch on that analogy of what the jobs of the future are, because I think that's actually, when you look from a societal rationale of why the education industry exists, we exist really to do two things. In each stage of learning, we're either preparing students for further learning, whether you're primary, preparing them from secondary, preparing them for tertiary, or you're preparing students for further employment. So that's really, when you boil down what is the entire purpose of education, it is for those two things: for preparing students for further learning, preparing students for the workforce. I'm curious, from your own story, like you have how you went from changing countries to developing like your world champion sort of skills in overclocking, and then you've moved into Intel, and you've got a lot of hats that you wear at Intel. What is your job title? Like, what is your role, and how does it even fit in? Can I
also tag onto that? I've had a few Dinos in my classroom before, and it's always a question of, how do I support this kid to be everything he can, have the kind of career that you've had to be successful? Like, why did you make it? So if I can just add to that.
I'll just go back to the beginnings. I let my passion projects drive my ambitions and my interests, and I've realized very early on that I'm going to be a lot happier and content if I do something that I loved, and if I could also make a career out of it, that would be fantastic. And and I say this stuff all the time. During my time at Gigabyte, I've worked there for maybe 9 or 10 years, and Intel 5 years. I mean, they pay me to do what I would do anyway. I love this job.
That's when you know you've got the right sort of job.
Yeah. So I follow the passion in technology, and I basically just opened myself wholeheartedly to it, and I loved sharing, and I loved growing people around me, and I feel like that's whether it's a hobby. So this Team AU thing, a lot of overclockers are very selfish people, and they have a tweak. They want to hide it. They think, if I have that, I'm going to be the best. I had a different mentality. I was like, you know what, guys? No, let's share, let's grow, let's bring up new generations, because you're not going to be motivated to do this forever. Let's keep bringing new people and share our experiences, and now I'm looking behind me at 3-4 generations of, for example, these people in my hobby. So that basically drove me.
Do you know what you're talking there? Exactly. We had another like a world-renowned educator, Kelly Hollis, on in a previous episode. She said something very, very similar about that we are stronger together. It's when we come together and share knowledge, we actually collectively grow to a higher performance.
Yeah. If you lift people around you, you're going to be better off for it. You don't. I never ask for anything in return with anyone. I just shared. But it just comes back, because a giving person, you always think there's always opportunity and stuff. So that's how my career progressed, and I ended up at Intel. And what do I do at Intel? So I ran channel business, because that's a tough slog. That's you're dealing with those little shops that sell PC components, and that was great. I love those guys, and they're always going to stay dear in my heart. But then I moved to the region because I ended up being a top performer, which is a handful of people in the company were rewarded with that honor by the CEO every year, and I ended up being one of 2 people in our region, that was selected for this honor. And so I also some extra opportunities opened up, and even in my jobs at Intel, I wasn't just like, yes, I was running channel, but I wasn't just running channel. I was like seeing who else is doing what, and I was putting my hand up to help people out, give advice, talk about my passions. I always wanted to connect my overclocking, my things like that, product development. So I was just doing things on the side that I loved. People recognize that, and now I'm in the region. I'm overlooking the entire client businesses and all the key sales and marketing motions, whether it's education or commercial business or consumer business. I'm one of a few spokespeople for Intel for this region, so I'll do launches, and I'm going to Vietnam next week. So we're launching something. I'm doing a keynote there. Meet some media interviews, stuff like that.
So help little Dino to share his passion.
Yeah,
and
follow
have a voice.
Follow your heart, follow your passion. Something that I think that's the most rewarding thing. And if what. I remember, and you asked me, what's the difference between, like a school system in Yugoslavia or whatever. So when I came to Sydney, I remember I started near the end of year 11. I had to do a little bit of English class stuff, to transition stuff. And there was this one teacher in the school that I attended that I loved. She was fantastic, Miss Lee. She was a music teacher. She was so caring, so giving, so positive, so supportive, always had a nice word, was always praising and encouraging. And I was a rugged type, but I was a heavy metal guy. I had long hair, I shaved, but that hit my heart, and that helped me grow my confidence. And I love that. I love what teachers do. Obviously my mum was a teacher too. I mean, it's such a tremendous profession. And when I'm involved in my technology side, I'm always thinking about what do these people need from us that we can make their lives easier. So that's my perspective in terms of my connection to teaching, I guess, if you will. So.
Look, I think that's a beautiful point. Like a highlight to actually sort of wrap up our podcast on. Like I think to be able to say, you've talked about all of this importance and development and change and trends within technology, but the humanity and the human connection is still one of those great movers and real, I guess, game changers within a child's life. And if we can connect on that human level with a student, wrap the appropriate technology and passion around them, then the world is their oyster. They can grow up. The little Dino can grow up to become big Dino.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good to me.
Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Dino.
Thanks for having me.
Look, Dino, that was fantastic. It was great to be able to have you come along and talk about education, technology in education, but get a perspective not from an educator, but from someone who is really significantly influencing the industry. It's great to have you along.
I really appreciate you guys having me along, and I wasn't really sure, if I would be able to contribute, to this broadcast as well as some of your, esteemed guests. But I hope that everyone's kind of learned something new about Intel and some of these trends that are happening right now. So.
Not only that, but hearing your story was really interesting. Yeah.
I tell you what. What's the one thing? I know you've got your finger on the pulse of what's one thing that we should be on the lookout for in the coming evolution within the PC world.
Oof, you're going to get me in trouble now. You're going to see,
this is our world exclusive.
14th, 15th gen, all the future products. You're going to see some really cool power performance improvements and we're evolving our performance hybrid architecture, which I mentioned in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And we are going to spice it up with something else. And we're going to improve a lot of accelerators and AI-based workloads. Ooh. There's a lot of, we kind of touched on this a little bit, There's a lot of cloud as well, kind of moving into some of the client. So there's this mixture of cloud and client devices that are moving into the future where we are subsidizing various things. And there's
a titillating tease
Yeah.
from Dino, and I think that's almost a calling card for maybe a return visit to the HP home of Reinvent the Classroom, and maybe we can unpack and see if we come back to that little titillation and
Absolutely.
see what became of that.
Absolutely.
Great to have you, Dino.
Cool.
Cheers.
Thank you very much.